Imagine for a moment that everything you struggle with, every fear, every insecurity, every impulse you've ever suppressed is not the enemy. It's a doorway, a message, a secret map leading you to the very core of who you are meant to become. What if the parts of yourself you've been running from hold the key to your purpose? What if the shame, the anger, the desires you've buried deep were actually the missing pieces to your fullest potential? Today, we step into one of the most profound and unsettling ideas in psychology, Carl Jung's theory of the shadow. This is not about abstract philosophy or distant concepts. It's about you, about unlocking the raw, unfiltered version of yourself that has been waiting beneath the surface. By the end of this journey, you will not only understand your shadow, you will learn how it holds the secret to your freedom, your power, and your destiny. And the final revelation we'll uncover? It's one that has the potential to change everything. Carl Jung, one of the most influential minds in psychology, believed that the shadow is the part of ourselves we reject. The impulses, desires, and traits we've been told are wrong or unacceptable. But here's the paradox: the very things we fear about ourselves are often the things that make us whole. Think about it. How often do you judge others for traits you secretly recognize in yourself? How often do you react with anger, disgust, or envy, only to later realize that the real discomfort comes from within? Jung famously said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Your shadow is not just the darkness. It's the untapped energy, the power, the locked away parts of yourself that are begging to be seen. And if you don't face it, it will find a way to manifest, whether you like it or not. Take a moment, reflect. What have you spent years suppressing? What parts of yourself do you keep locked away, even from yourself? Maybe it's an ambition you've convinced yourself is too much. Maybe it's an anger you refuse to acknowledge. Maybe it's a creativity you've been too afraid to unleash. Now ask yourself, what if these weren't flaws? What if they were clues? What if they were the very things that could set you free? Jung believed that when we confront our shadow, when we stop running from it and instead integrate it into our conscious mind, we undergo a process called individuation. This is not self-improvement. This is self-acceptance. This is the journey to becoming your true self, not just the version of you that the world expects. But let's be clear, this is not easy. It requires radical honesty. It means facing the parts of yourself you would rather ignore. But history, mythology, and even modern storytelling show us that every great transformation comes from this confrontation. Consider mythology. Every hero must face their darkness before they can rise. Hercules had to battle not just monsters, but his own rage. Luke Skywalker had to confront his own capacity for darkness before he could truly become a Jedi. These stories mirror our own psychological battles. Now the question is, are you ready to take that first step? Are you ready to stop fearing your shadow and start listening to what it has to say? Jung tells us that the shadow doesn't just show up in our thoughts. It appears in our dreams, our relationships, and our strongest emotions. Have you ever had a dream that disturbed you or felt an intense reaction to someone without fully understanding why? That's your shadow speaking. It shows up in the moments when you feel out of control, in the arguments that escalate for no logical reason, in the envy that stings a little too sharply. The more we suppress it, the stronger it becomes. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the more violently it will rise when you can no longer contain it. So if your shadow refuses to be ignored, what happens when you finally stop running from it? This is where real transformation begins. The first step is awareness. Pay attention to the emotions that seem irrational or overwhelming, because they are clues. The next step, acceptance. This does not mean indulging every impulse or acting on destructive tendencies. It means acknowledging that they exist and understanding why they are there. Imagine how liberating it would be to no longer fear your own mind, to no longer be at war with yourself. Imagine a life where instead of being controlled by the things you suppress, you learn to harness them. Now let's take this further. Your shadow is not just about your inner world. It directly affects your relationships, your career, your purpose. Have you ever noticed patterns in your life? Maybe you keep attracting the same type of relationship, running into the same conflicts, or feeling drawn to the same situations over and over. This isn't random. This is your shadow manifesting in the external world, mirroring the lessons you have yet to learn. Jung called this projection, the idea that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves, we see in others. Ever been irritated by someone who seems arrogant, only to realize later that it was your own insecurities being triggered, or judge someone for something you secretly wished you had the courage to do? Projection is the shadow's way of forcing us to see what we refuse to confront internally. Now here's the real power in all of this. When you stop projecting, when you stop avoiding, when you start integrating your shadow, you reclaim every part of yourself. You unlock potential that has been buried for years. The energy that was once spent suppressing parts of you is now available for creativity, passion, and purpose. Think of history's greatest minds. They didn't become who they were by suppressing their shadows, they embraced them. Frida Kahlo poured her pain into her art. Martin Luther King Jr. transformed his anger at injustice into a movement that changed the world. So ask yourself, what parts of yourself have you abandoned? What power have you left untapped? Your purpose isn't something you find, it's something you uncover. And it begins with confronting the parts of yourself that you fear the most. But here's the final, most profound insight of all. When you integrate your shadow, it doesn't just change you, it changes the world around you. Because when you are no longer at war with yourself, you stop projecting that war onto others. You develop deeper empathy, greater understanding, a new level of freedom. Imagine a world where more people did this work, where instead of blaming and projecting, people took ownership of their own darkness, where self-awareness replaced fear, where instead of hiding, we embrace the totality of who we are. That world starts with you. So I leave you with one final challenge. What is your shadow trying to tell you? And are you ready to listen? The journey to self-acceptance is not easy, but it is the most important journey you will ever take. And the first step, it starts right now. Part 2, the shadow's hidden power and the ultimate transformation. Now that we've uncovered the truth about the shadow, how it controls us, how it seeps into our relationships, and how it projects itself onto the world around us, it's time to go deeper. To step beyond just understanding and into transformation. Because here's what you need to know. The shadow is not just something to integrate, it's something to harness. It holds an energy, a power that once claimed can change the way you live, the way you create, the way you connect with others, and the way you step into your purpose. But first, you must ask yourself a crucial question. What have I been afraid to admit about myself? Maybe it's an ambition so big it terrifies you. Maybe it's a desire you've convinced yourself is wrong. Maybe it's an emotion, rage, grief, even love, that you've spent years trying to numb. Whatever it is, it's still there. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it will become. So what happens when you stop fighting it? What happens when, instead of suppressing your shadow, you look it in the eyes and say, I see you, I hear you, and I am ready to understand you? This is where the real transformation begins. Jung believed that integrating your shadow is the key to true individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not the version of you that follows society's script, not the version of you shaped by fear, shame, or childhood conditioning, but the version of you that is raw, real, and free. And when you reach this point, when you begin to reclaim your lost pieces, you will notice something strange, something almost magical. The world will start to shift around you. You'll begin to see people differently. Conflicts that once triggered you will lose their power. The patterns that have followed you for years, relationships that ended the same way, cycles of self-sabotage, unfulfilled dreams, they will start to break. Why? Because when you change internally, the external world must respond. This is not just psychological theory, it's reality. Imagine you've spent your whole life hiding your voice, afraid to speak your truth. That unspoken energy builds up, shaping your reality. You avoid confrontation. You let opportunities pass. You downplay your ideas. But when you integrate your shadow, when you claim that suppressed part of yourself, you begin to own your voice. You speak with conviction. and suddenly the world listens. Or maybe you've always carried a deep resentment toward people who seem bold, fearless, unapologetic. What if that resentment was just your shadow saying, that is who you could be if you let yourself? Every suppressed trait, every denied part of yourself is a power waiting to be reclaimed. So how do we do it? How do we integrate the shadow? It begins with radical self-awareness. Pay attention to the moments that trigger you, the moments when you overreact, the moments when your emotions seem bigger than the situation. Ask yourself, what is this reaction really about? If someone's arrogance irritates you, could it be that deep down, you've been conditioned to play small, and you resent them for doing what you've never let yourself do? If you constantly feel rejected, could it be that you've already rejected parts of yourself? Your emotions are not random. They are maps. And when you stop seeing your triggers as problems and start seeing them as clues, you begin to take your power back. The shadow in creativity, leadership, and love. Let's take this even further. The shadow doesn't just impact how we see ourselves. It affects how we create, how we lead, and how we love. Think about the greatest artists, the most unforgettable performers, the most revolutionary leaders. They weren't people who ran from their darkness. They were people who channeled it. Vincent van Gogh painted the depths of his mind onto canvas. David Bowie used his inner contradictions to redefine music and identity. Maya Angelou turned trauma into poetry that shook the world. They didn't suppress their shadow. They expressed it. And this isn't just about artists. It's about leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, even relationships. The more you suppress your shadow, the more surface level your work, your leadership, and your love will be. But when you integrate it, when you bring your whole self into what you do, everything changes. A leader who acknowledges their fears instead of pretending to be invincible, that's someone people trust. An artist who expresses their pain instead of masking it, that's someone who creates work that moves people. A partner who owns their insecurities instead of projecting them, that's someone who builds real, deep connections. When you claim your shadow, you don't just become more powerful, you become magnetic. The final truth, your shadow is your greatest guide. Now here's the final truth. The truth that so many people spend their whole lives avoiding. You cannot outrun your shadow. No matter how much you try to suppress it, distract yourself, or pretend it isn't there, it will find a way to show itself. So you have two choices. You can keep running, keep repeating the same patterns, keep blaming the world for the things that are really inside you. Or you can turn around and face it. You can own it, integrate it, work with it instead of against it. And when you do, you will discover something you never expected. Your shadow, the thing you thought was your greatest weakness, was actually your greatest source of power. Because when you embrace your shadow, you become whole. And when you are whole, you stop living on autopilot. You stop following other people's rules. You stop existing, and you start living. The challenge. Are you ready to see yourself? So now the challenge is yours. Look at your life, your emotions, your triggers. What is your shadow trying to tell you? Are you ready to stop rejecting parts of yourself? Are you ready to stop running from the one thing that could finally set you free? Because the moment you say yes, the moment you decide to see yourself fully, you begin the most powerful journey of your life, a journey of depth, of transformation, of purpose. And when you emerge on the other side, you won't just be free, you will be unstoppable. Make sure to subscribe to the Mind's Mirror channel. Don't forget to hit the like button. Share this video with those who need to hear this truth, and stay tuned for new content every day together. Let's continue the journey toward understanding growth in the pursuit of a more powerful life.